This is going to be a sad video, man. And I'm not just saying that because I'm recording this after my Dolphins post-game video because, well, that was depressing. But the reason this is sad is because yesterday the Miami Heat cut our guy Isaiah Stevens, the kid that we fell in love with from the summer league, who was running an amazing offense, great lob passes, was just an elite facilitator. But yesterday he was officially a casualty in the curious blackmail case of Drew Smith, or whatever you want to call it, because I still don't know why Drew Smith is on the roster. Okay, well, I do, before I get 100 comments telling me about it, because I haven't been the most optimistic on Drew Smith, and somehow there's fans that tell me he's can run an offense and he's a decent point of attack defender, and he's fine at both of those things. But Isaiah Stevens was so much more. But we'll get into that because the Heat did make a few other cuts to narrow down their final roster going into opening nights on just a couple of days, as they open on Wednesday versus the Orlando Magic. So the Heat roster is officially at 14 plus 3 two-way spots. That gets them at 17 total. Of course, you're allowed 15 normal players, but they can't actually add another guy, even if he's a minimum, because that would put them into the second apron, which they want to avoid at all costs. Now, mid-season, by the buyout deadline, I think it's, or even somewhere in January, the prorated rate of what a minimum guy would be is actually less than where they're at underneath the second apron. So all that to say, they can add a 15th player, just not yet. It'll be early in 2025, which they're allowed to. So, for example, if a guy like Keshad Johnson pops off, they could sign him to an official contract. Or Lonnie Walker, if he's still a free agent, because he was waived yesterday. A lot of Heat fans want to pick him up. I wish we could too. I want to see him do the Cam Ward celebration, because actually these cuts happened yesterday during the Hurricanes game, which I wanted to get a video out to y'all then, but I was watching my boy Cam Ward put up 52 points. I'm sorry, that had priority. And I will say I will actually be at FSU versus Miami on Saturday. So I know the Heat play the same night versus Charlotte. So the post game, it'll either be late or not happen, because I'll be at the game, but maybe I'll get y'all a vlog from the game. But anyways, the Heat did make their official cuts then, and Lonnie Walker was a part of his team's cuts. A lot of Heat fans want him. I would too, but I don't think it'll happen now. If he somehow stays a free agent for the next 3 or 4 months, the Heat could then afford him then, but we'll see what happens. Of course, there's trades that could happen mid-season to change all the salary cap stuff. But anyways, here's where the roster stands now. We'll go in alphabetical order. According to ESPN, you got Bam Adebayo, Thomas Bryant, Alec Burks, Jimmy Butler, Josh Christopher on a two-way, Tyler Hero, Haywood Highsmith, Jaime Jaquez Jr., Keshad Johnson on a two-way, Nikola Jovic, Pelle Larsson, Kevin Love, Josh Richardson, Duncan Robinson, Terry Rozier, Drew Smith on a two-way for some reason. And then Khalil Ware is your 17th and final player there. So that means that some of the cuts that the Miami Heat did yesterday was, unfortunately, our guy Isaiah Stevens. We'll start with him because a couple months ago during the summer league, I thought that he was a lock to make the roster. He was on an Exhibit 10 deal while Drew Smith was on a two-way. I thought that was just a bit of a formality, which allowed Isaiah Stevens to play in the preseason while also giving that roster spot, or keeping Drew Smith with an official roster spot, allowing him to get paid, which was sort of a nice gesture because, of course, he tore his ACL last season with the Miami Heat. So I thought that was them just doing him a solid, allowing Drew Smith to get paid, giving Isaiah Stevens the non-guaranteed, and then by the time the season starts, they would give that final two-way spot to Isaiah Stevens. Well, that ended up not happening. And as the preseason sort of played out and we saw Drew Smith get a lot of minutes and be the first guy off the bench in Spoelstra's rotations, my optimism that Isaiah Stevens would make a roster spot slowly started to dwindle down, which of course ended up not happening. So real quick on the Drew Smith stuff, again, he's not a bad player. And if he's a guy that never plays or is just an injury insurance guy that has to come in, he's fine because he doesn't make a lot of mistakes. He can dribble. The shot was decent in preseason, and he is a decent point of attack defender. He's fine at it at least. But he doesn't do much else, which again, for a guy that probably won't be playing, probably shouldn't be playing, like I said, he's just an injury insurance, that's a good thing to have, right? You want to be able to supplement in a guy that is not going to mess things up, that is just going to kind of be a nice plug-and-play player. I get that. It's a nice thing to have. But when the alternative is a guy like Isaiah Stevens, who was elite at facilitating, I just don't see how you can keep the plug and play, no mistake guy. Because not only was Isaiah Stevens a no mistake guy, sure, he was a little bit worse on defense because he's smaller, but I don't even feel like he was terrible on defense. It's not like he was an unplayable turnstile. He was solid on the defensive end, just not as good at Drew Smith. But his playmaking was on a whole other level. And he provides something that this Miami Heat roster doesn't have. Because if you look at their guards, Terry Rozier is a very good facilitator. He's great at throwing the lob. He's good at that. But he is more of a scorer, right? He's not known as a true stereotypical point guard, right? You got Josh Richardson, who is not a playmaker either. Now, when he was younger, he was a great perimeter defender. So if they have him, I don't know why you would need Drew Smith to play defense. But I will say Josh Richardson's defense has been lacking a little bit. Then obviously you do got Drew Smith. You got Tyler Hero, who's an improved playmaker, but still a scorer. Same with Duncan Robinson. Obviously Burks is a shooter. Josh Christopher's a shooter. And then even you got a guy like Hayward Highsmith, who's probably more of a wing player, but he's still a point of attack defender. So point is, you have guys that can do what Drew Smith does as far as the perimeter defense, right? Which is why guys love him. And to emphasize again, I don't even think Drew Smith is an elite perimeter defender. I think a guy like Gabe Vincent was. I think guys they found off the street like Marcus Garrett was. There's guys that can play perimeter defense out there. Davion Mitchell is a former lottery pick that's just hanging on out there on the end of someone's bench. That guy is an elite perimeter defender. Drew Smith is not that. He's fine at that. So the fact that you'd keep him over Isaiah Stevens, who nobody on the roster can do what he does, coming in at his age, I know he was a 4-year college guy, but he's still a rookie. The way he reads the game at such a low level of professional experience is sensational. He makes reads that just make it look like he's seeing the game in slow motion. He can't get sped up no matter how much confusion is going on the court around him. There'll be times plays would break down or he would get pressured and get double teamed and triple teamed and a guy might slip on the sideline and he doesn't lose his composure. We're talking about Cam Ward, who's so nonchalant. That's Isaiah Stevens. Both of those guys never get pressed no matter how much is going on around them. They're always composed and is able to make the right read. And I've been so impressed with that ability with Isaiah Stevens, not to mention his pinpoint passing accuracy. In that last game versus the Grizzlies, he had this one where he was dancing on the perimeter with 2 or 3 guys guarding him, was able to get a quick step, wrap around, drive baseline, threw a lob from behind the backboard, pinpointed to Khalil Ware. The kind of chemistry that Stevens has had with everyone that he's played with, Kashad and Khalil Ware, it's awesome. It's like he's an instant chemistry fit. He's just elite at what he does, and I don't think you can find a guy with that skill sets off the street. Like I said, there's a lot of guys that are great perimeter defenders. There's not a lot of guys that that can do what Isaiah Stevens does, and I just don't think you can let a guy like that walk. Now, I'm sure he'll be funneled to their G League team. He'll be with Sioux Falls Skyforce. And from that point, you just got to hope he doesn't get poached. You really do. Now, maybe that he had some, under the table conversations with him saying, hey, if you get an offer, don't sign it. We promise we'll sign you to a guaranteed roster in January when we're allowed to do that. If I was Isaiah Stevens, on one hand, I might not want to do that because he has a chance to get a guaranteed contract for a guy that was undrafted. You can't pass that up. But on the other hand, I might be willing to do it because, of course, the Heat have a track record of turning undrafted players into guys that get some pretty monster deals. So I could see Isaiah Stevens saying it's best for his future to stick around with the Miami Heat. But again, this is all speculation if they offered him an under-the-table deal 4 months from now. We don't know. It's just I know that he's the type of player that the Heat like. So is Drew Smith. Don't get me wrong, a guy that plays defense. But a guy with the IQ of Isaiah Stevens, they also like that mold of player. A guy who's not going to go out there and take crazy shots and do too much. And I know the Heat aren't stupid. Obviously, the front office is not stupid. They know more than me. So it's kind of hard for me to fathom why they would let a guy like that go. So I'm hoping that they have something under the sleeve to keep him, or maybe they have got a good feeling that he won't get poached from their G League team. I don't know. But if he goes out there in Sioux Falls and starts averaging 14 assists a game and five, that's too much. We'll say 3 turnovers. That's crazy. 14 assists and 3 turnovers is crazy, but who knows? If he starts doing some crazy numbers like that, maybe another team does take him. Because I do think players that are true facilitators is at a minimum in this league, like as far as the availability of them. It's sort of a lost art to the traditional point guard, right? Because now all point guards want to do is score the ball. But I still think you need a guy that can run your offense. And especially if you would have had Stevens coming off the bench to really run that second unit, a second unit that struggled a ton last year with regards to scoring the ball. The whole team struggled to score. I just think having a guy like that to get guys in their spots off the bench would have been invaluable. But they waive Isaiah Stevens. We'll see what happens in the future. Moving on, a couple of other guys that they cut who I don't have as much to say about. Don't worry. One, Nasir Little. People were excited when the Heat signed him. I really necessarily wasn't, just because he had bounced around the league for a while. Obviously, the number 1 or 2 ranked player coming out of high school, went to UNC. And in the draft, he was, of course, a lottery pick. And at the time, I wasn't high on him. I actually have my list of do's and don'ts of the 2019 draft. He was on my don't list, right? Now, that being said, I did have guys like Sekou Doumbouya on my do draft list, and obviously he kind of sucked. So I'm not saying that I know everything, although I did like the Tyler Hero pick, but I never really was a big fan of Nasir Little just because he was a guy that relied heavily on athleticism to score in his high school and college days, and I didn't think that he was big enough or more athletic enough to be able to continue that on the NBA level, I suppose. I figured he could do it on a defensive end because at 6'6", he does have a nice muscular frame. He can guard, but he's just not versatile enough offensively. The last game versus the Grizzlies was his best game, hit 3 or 4 threes, but the shot looks a little bit awkward, and he's obviously not that coordinated in that regard. So he's a guy that he would have liked from a perimeter defense aspect for sure. Could have been sort of like a Caleb Martin role, or they would have hoped they could develop him into that. But the reality is you got enough guys at that wing position, like Haywood we mentioned earlier, like Jaime Jaquez. Pelle Larsson has been awesome defensively and offensively. I just don't think there was a clear fit for Nasir Little. Maybe he'll be on their G League team as well, and he'll get another chance in the future because he still is very young, right? I mean, he was same draft as Tyler Hero, a one-and-done guy. So what's that put him at, 20, 23, 24? Still got some time to improve in this league. Other than that, they waived Zion Poulin, who was initially on a 2-way contract immediately following the draft, and that was taken away pretty quick because obviously he was outplayed by guys like Drew Smith and Isaiah Stevens over the course of, summer league for Stevens and then preseason for Drew Smith. Zion Poulin is a guy they looked at to kind of be their prototypical point guard as well. Coming out of Florida, he did have a nice assist-to-turnover ratio, but just never really stood out. He was sort of like Drew Smith to a lesser degree in terms of a guy who did nothing. He just did a little too much nothing, but he still is super, super young, very raw prospect. Also had his best game, the last preseason game versus Memphis. And it's not like he can't score. He's shown an ability to kind of get to that mid-range spot that he likes, and he could put the ball in the hoop a little bit as well. So he will be a guy that will stick around in the G League, and maybe we revisit him over the course of the next 2 or 3 seasons because the potential is there for him to maybe be a rotational or backup guard in the league few years down the line, just not right now. And then the last guy that they cut was Warren Washington, who I don't know enough about because he played like half of the last preseason game, so I can't speak too much on him. But anyways, that's what we got as the official Miami Heat roster. I will have a couple more videos out before the season starts. I want to do one on my bold Heat-related takes. I want to do another one on my rotation prediction because I think that's going to be very interesting. And then probably after the first game at some point, I'll have a long podcast giving my full thoughts on every player on the roster. That's just kind of something I like to do every year. So when the season's over, we can look back and see how stupid I was for loving some guys or hating some guys or whatever. We'll see. I guess Drew Smith will be the only guy here that I'm not super high on. But I hope I'm wrong because all my comments tell me that I am. So we'll see what happens. Anyways, the Heat season does start on Wednesday. I'll get y'all up a post game on that. Other than that, I'll see y'all next time. So peace out, everyone.
Look, pull up in your city trying to get that dead face. Do it on my own, I don't need no dead weight. Had to kill him off, yeah, I need that head space. You know this homegrown bitch don't offend me.